For any of you guys who don't know, I am Dr. Mike Albert, a weight loss physician in Southern California. How do I give up sugar? She paints the stars. Ooh, I actually like that name a lot. Great question. That's tough. Sugar, in its pure form, and when it is combined with fat, oftentimes in many food products, it triggers the same neural pathways that many substances of abuse do. So we call this neural circuit the mesolimbic system. Many of you probably have heard that this is the part of the brain where dopamine is released, along with a number of other neural hormones. And so it's self-rewarding that way, and it can condition you to seek out and these specific types of foods. Usually people don't have a problem with sugar by itself. It's usually sugar plus something else. So when you look at pizza, when you look at muffins, brownies, Cinnabon, all this stuff is sugar and fat together. People are, you're not seeing anyone sort of like snort sugar, in a dark alley or something. But people have a problem with these, combination foods that are sugar and fat and highly processed. How do you deal with that? The reality that these food products are everywhere, at every street corner, in every store. It's tough. It's really tough. I would say that one, you need to make an effort to plan ahead. If you know you're someone who has a tendency to be drawn towards these foods, plan ahead, whether you're going out to eat, whether you're going to the store. But probably the most important thing is to plan in your home, because you don't have control over a lot of the advertisements that get shown or what's in the various stores and places outside your home. You do have control of what's in your home. So the biggest thing you can do, getting back to your original question, is get that crap out of your house. Absolutely. I don't care if your kids like it. I don't care if your husband likes it, your spouse, whoever. Get it out of your house. The more that you have it in your house, the more that you will be tempted. And the way your brain works, the way those neurocircuits work, is that once you see it, so if you see it when you're out and about at your job, on a commercial, and you've done the good, you've had good sort of engagement in terms of understanding your urges and wanting, and you've been mindful of that, and you've been able to talk yourself through it, maybe distract yourself, any number of different techniques that I hopefully will get to talking about on my channel at some point. There's a lot of stuff I want to cover, but there are a bunch of different techniques I use with patients, stuff like urge surfing, cognitive restructuring. There's a bunch of stuff. After you do that, once you come home, if it's staring you in the face in the kitchen, in the pantry, you're going to reach for it more often than not. So one thing you can do is stimulus to control, and that's removing it from your house. That's for the starters. That's where I would start, is making sure you control the things you can. Great question, though. Sugar, fat, processed foods, they're really tough, man. They're really, really tough to deal with. How do I lose weight while a diabetic? That's tough. Most diabetics, pretty much all of them, it's by definition, have insulin resistance, which can make it harder to lose weight. What I would tell you is the body of evidence, and this is from Sugar Bear Pie, the body of evidence suggests at this time that probably the most weight loss friendly diet for diabetics is one that's high in protein, usually about 30% of your calories coming from protein, which if you saw in one of my earlier videos today, that usually works around to be like 1 gram per pound of body weight. 30% of your calories coming from protein, which most people are, when they've done surveys, are closer to like 15% in the US population. So it's like doubling your current protein. And then cutting your carbohydrates. So the average American gets anywhere from 50 to 60% of their calories from carbs. Cutting your carb consumption. And then when you are eating carbs that are low in glycemic load. So what that means is when you eat the carbohydrate and digest it, you're not getting a big bolus, a huge amount of sugar. It's not being broken down into a ton of sugar all at once. It's being slowly released. And usually these foods are non-starchy vegetables, so things that are green and leafy, asparagus, cucumbers, broccoli, cauliflower, salad greens, all those types of things that are low in sugar and have high fiber content, and then also low sugar fruit. So protein plus, whether it's animal, plant-based, a mix of sort of dairy protein um, as well as the sort of lower carb content and the lower sugar fruits and vegetables is really what the evidence suggests is the best way to control your diabetes and potentially help you lose weight. That's what I would go for from a dietary standpoint from someone who has diabetes. Oh my gosh, I didn't know. How does one get more dopamine in their body? So dopamine is produced in your body. So unless you have a disease that destroys the dopamine producing cells, most people don't, but some do. Normally you make enough. So it's about using those systems correctly and not abusing them. The problem is that we as Americans tend to over-trigger these systems, and then the neural circuitry in our brains then gets rewired. And when it gets rewired, there is some ability for it to remain plastic. When I mean plastic is you can kind of remold the way that your brain circuits work. But there's an extent, there's a limitation. And so what we see in people that have long histories of substance use problems is that they rewire their brains pretty significantly. And there's some evidence that if they can be abstinent from drug use, they can modify their neural circuits a little bit, but they can never return to their baseline pre-drug use. And so that's why when people say substance use disorders are a disease, they are, because it's causing real change and pathology in the brain. And that relapse is high in many people who have had substance use problems because they've had permanent changes to the neurocircuitry of their brain such that they're constantly having to sort of battle their own inner struggle and their own triggering of their brain. These are subconscious cues that are being sent to them. These same cues that tell people to continue to use heroin and alcohol the rest of their life that they have to fight with and that oftentimes leads to relapse are the same things that happen to people who have been using and overeating many of these processed foods. It's the exact same neurocircuits. So when we talk about is food addiction real, I think there's a growing consensus among the scientific community that it's having a lot of the same changes that many of these other things that we often attribute to addiction as being real. So I think, the struggle is real, that given the fact that you can have some brain changes, you can't expect yourself to be perfect in terms of abstaining. But in order to improve your opportunity to avoid these foods and to use better alternatives, once again, control the things you can, your home environment. Guys, I can't stress that enough. Don't play this game. If you have problematic eating with processed foods, don't play this game of moderation. It's not going to help you. Moderation is no one's friend if you already have problematic behavior. If you are someone who can moderate, and this is where you have to be honest with yourself, if you're someone who can moderate and it doesn't become problematic, that's a different story. That's where you have to have this honest conversation with yourself, getting into some of my videos I posted today about looking at yourself in the mirror and saying and just laying it out there. You got to know and be introspective in some regard. But that's what I would say about them. What do you think about protein diets? Says Wicked Witch of the East. I love it. Protein diets are great. I think an effective weight loss diet does emphasize protein significantly. I think the literature is pretty clear. And it doesn't mean that it necessarily leads to more weight loss when you compare it to other diets. So I don't want to give that off. But what we see is that body composition improves on a higher protein diet, more so than other diets with lower protein content. So you get more bone mass and skeletal muscle, which are key because long-term, those are essential for increasing your metabolic rate despite weight loss. And then you lose more fat mass relatively. So you get a better body composition by comparison to other diets. And so that, we know there's a new study, guys, that just came out in American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, which is the premier journal for nutrition came out and said having an optimal body composition where you maximize your lean body mass, so your bone and muscle, and you minimize your fat mass, predicts longevity, predicts early death. If you have the opposite, if you have a lot more fat compared to your lean body mass, then you have a much higher risk of death. So body composition, we know, is directly related to your health and longevity. So in that regard, I would say we should all strive to improve our body compositions. And if we're trying to do that, then a high protein diet, barring you have no kidney issues, right? The advanced kidney disease is where protein diets can be a little problematic because your kidneys can't filter protein adequately at that point. But barring that, high protein diets have been shown to be effective in almost pretty much every disease type. People with fatty liver, it helps them. People with even heart disease and heart failure, it's been shown to help them lose weight. Some recent studies that have come out. So, metabolic disease we talk about a lot. That's protein diets have been shown to be very effective. So I'm a big fan of protein diets. You just also, anytime you talk about protein, it sounds pretty vague. You have to talk about the quality. And that's where I get back to some of the most important things. Quality is so essential, guys. Quality of the nutrients you're taking in. I'm not talking about protein bars, right? That's not a quality source. We want to eat whole, real foods. So we're talking about lean chicken breast. We're talking about legumes, right? Beans of different varieties. We're talking about dairy. We're talking about, low-fat yogurt, eggs, all of these good sources of protein, these natural sources. That's what we want to focus on. We don't want to focus on the supplemental stuff. You can supplement to meet sort of your goals, but your core protein intake shouldn't be from supplements. Are eggs good for you? Are eggs bad for you? What I would tell you is if you are having 2 to 4 to 5 eggs a day, there's really no strong evidence to suggest that's bad for you. I think the nutritional epidemiology is really unreliable, and so I wouldn't count, I wouldn't put a whole lot of credit in that. If eggs are helping you sustain a healthy weight, then I would say yes, they're healthy for you. What do you think about weight loss surgery? That's a really broad question, Deanna. I'm going to try to summarize my thoughts very briefly. For people who have high risk related to their excess weight, having health-related issues, I think it is a critical piece of intervention. So I saw a number of recent consults of people that had, not only did they have weight problems and had them for many years, some of whom have had it for their whole lives, but they were now developing weight-related issues, sleep apnea, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, all these other things. We know for those individuals who need to lose a significant amount of weight to reduce their risk, right? And there are some cutoffs that insurance companies and some people care about. I look at the overall health picture to decide whether or not it's appropriate for someone to have surgery, and then I refer them to my partners at the Weight Loss Center. So if your risk is high enough, we know that you're more likely to lose more weight with weight loss surgery. And when you pair weight loss surgery with medication, with a comprehensive, weight loss program, that's when people can have really amazing results and be life-changing. Number of patients of mine who have been plugged in with a program, who are on medication, who have had surgery, lost 100, 200, 300 pounds, and I've kept it off. So, I think the common thing I hear when people are hesitant about surgery, even if they're a good candidate, is I have this friend of mine, I know this person, they had a bad outcome. I can tell you when we've studied this, who has bad outcomes with weight loss surgery, by and large and consistently, it are individuals who went to a weight loss center, got the surgery, and then were never followed up again. Listen, this is not a one-stop shop and you're done. This is a lifelong condition that you have to deal with, and that we know if you continue to be plugged in with support, that you do better, and that those individuals don't have the same amount of issues that people who, treat it more as a one-time deal do. And I would just view it this way, guys. Like blood pressure, like high cholesterol, like diabetes, you wouldn't just go to the doctor one time, get one treatment, and then expect those problems to go away, right? We shouldn't view weight any different that way. So I would just say it's important to stay plugged into a system you're comfortable with, providers that know you, who can help you continue to manage your ongoing health-related issues. That we know is the most effective. All right, great question though. I don't know if that's helpful. That was kind of a vague, high-level answer. Ran my cholesterol level up though. Well, okay, great. So this is a great point, Wicked Witch. Um, if you are noticing associations between your dietary changes and your personal health markers, that's something you should listen. You have to personalize your approach. If you've been eating more red meat, more saturated fats, which we know can increase the LDL, which is the typically the bad cholesterol that's atherogenic, meaning promotes cardiovascular disease, then you probably have to change. Maybe switch, decrease your saturated fat intake, focus on more anti-inflammatory plant-based foods that we also know are better from a cardiovascular standpoint. Focus on more healthy fats. These are unsaturated fats, mono and polyunsaturated fats like you would get in fish, or you would get in nuts, or you would get in avocado and seeds. So yeah, you always have to, if things aren't going well, you got to kind of reassess, and that's a constant thing. That's why it's not a one and done. ADHD problem. Doctor says dopamine gets depleted and leads to my insomnia. Uh, that's not something that I'm aware of. So maybe that's that's outside of my knowledge base. Then I'm not a sleep specialist, so I don't know as it relates to that. I'm not familiar with that ever happening. But I will say there's a lot of just because you're a doctor and you've gone to medical school doesn't mean you know anything. I really and just because you are a lay person doesn't mean you aren't very knowledgeable about things. Most of the time, our patients understand their conditions much better than we do, and that's why I'm very humbled when I talk to my patients, because they've been living with this condition oftentimes many years longer than I've ever even known, and so they have tremendous insight. So I listen to patients a lot and really try to understand them and what they're going through in their experience, because that better informs me so I can take the best care for them. Same thing goes. I think there is something to be said for the 10 plus years of training that I've gone through, and the specialized training and the content expertise that I offer. But I also don't tell my patients to just take it at face value, that if they have questions or concerns, they can always ask me. They can always get a second opinion. I'm not too arrogant to believe that the buck stops with me. I encourage them to get all the questions answered before they pursue something like surgery, medications, anything like that. It's if any doctor is offended by you asking questions or advocating on your own behalf, then they're not worth a damn, to be honest. So I think it's your body and your life. So guys, always be your own advocate, and unfortunately, sometimes you have to really advocate for yourself to receive proper care, and that's one unfortunate aspect of our healthcare system. Trying to get the cancer weight off. Interesting. Usually cancer is associated with weight loss. Now, I'm assuming when you say trying to get the cancer weight off that you had weight gain with your cancer. So first off, I'm sorry to hear you have cancer. I hope you're doing well. I don't know where you are in your treatment, but hopefully it's in a good part of your treatment, or that you're in remission or whatever. But I would say if you have a cancer regimen that had like a lot of steroids, which some cancer regimens do, particularly blood cancers can have a lot of steroids as part of their sort of chemotherapy regimens, then yeah, that could cause weight gain. Hopefully, and as it relates to most drugs that promote weight gain, if you're off the medication, it's much easier than to lose weight that you gain from being on it. If you're still on the medication, it's a challenge if that medicine is directly promoting weight gain. So there are a number of medications. I haven't done a video on this yet, and I might do one if people are interested. There are a number of medications that can promote weight gain. Most doctors aren't aware of that. It's not something that's really focused on in medical school, I can tell you. It wasn't until I got into this specialty that I really, started paying attention to these things a lot. Am I taking new patients? I am taking new patients. You can call my office. I'm on the, if you Google me on the internet, you can find my office number and call. That's the best way to do it on Monday if you're interested. I only see patients in California. I will tell you that due to the restrictions about how medical care can be provided. Vintage Blonde 1974 asks, "Hi doc, I'm struggling with my diet. I think my medication is hampering my loss. Frustrating." That is, once again, medications can do that. Depends on the type. And interesting enough, it depends on the type and it depends on the person. Not everyone's going to respond the same way. And very similar to the fact that not everyone's going to have the same response to weight loss medication. Some people can have just a really impressive response. Some people can be complete non-responders. So that's the part of medicine that us doctors and scientists haven't figured out yet. That really personal precision aspect, that definitely relates genetics to sort of these, what we know are epigenetic considerations. There's a lot of science nuance to it, but in any case, if medications are struggling, sometimes I work with patients on figuring out, are there substitutions we can do? So for instance, some of the antidepressants can cause weight gain. And so what we will do is see, is there an alternative antidepressant that is more weight neutral or weight loss promoting? And so we sometimes try to do these different things to help people. And sometimes it can make a difference, Not all the time is that something that is an option, because some people need to be on certain medicines or have been stable on certain medicines for a long time. And those cases, we try to find other options, because I think the medication can be really important in terms of preserving quality of life if someone has been doing really well on a particular medicine. But it doesn't make it any less frustrating. I can hear you. Are you near Tennessee? No. California is where I practice. If you quit eating so much, your stomach will shrink itself. Your stomach does have some ability to expand. We know that for sure. Competitive eaters will eat a bunch of like salad and things like that to expand the contents of their stomach so that they can eat more food at a time. You definitely can, and it definitely will shrink if you're not giving it that constant stimulus. There's that's been very clearly documented. You can even expand the sort of modified stomach when you have a weight loss surgery. So that can happen too. So it's sort of crudely referred to as like eating through your surgery. You can certainly do that. There is a limit to which the stomach will allow more food in, and if for whatever reason you're not getting the normal responses to stop you from eating, or you have other things that are driving your eating besides normal sort of hormonal signals, maybe it's emotional eating, stress eating, something else that we know can play a role. So you're eating past sort of the point of being full, then your body tries to adapt to the best it can given the sort of the stimulation at the time, and that's your body trying to do its best to keep up with what's going on. Stomach pains after my third week of Ozempic, Vanis Landstyle. This is a nice little segue. We're still kind of on the drug topic. Maybe this is like drug adjacent. So Ozempic, for you all who don't know, which is a GLP-1 agonist. It's an injectable diabetes medication that is now, as I've sort of been talking about, being repurposed for weight loss at a higher dose. I think, in my experience, a very effective drug in both treating diabetes, but also in helping weight loss. Been putting more and more people on it recently. The biggest side effects that we typically see, and we usually see them in the first month, are GI related. So people can get nausea. In the worst cases, they get vomiting. They can get some constipation, diarrhea. It's about 10 to 15% of the time that they'll experience these symptoms when you look at the data from the clinical trials. There are ways to get around this. So sometimes you can't get around it, and we have to do short-time medication to help with those symptoms. I don't like prescribing more medicine to treat a symptom of or a side effect another medicine cause. I'm not a fan. So if there are ways that we can get around that, we try to. If the symptoms are mild, usually you develop a tolerance to it. So it'll go away usually within a few days. If the symptoms are significant and are related to you escalating the dose, what you can do is go back down to the lower dose and stay on that lower dose for a longer period. So I've done that before with patients. You typically start at 0.25, and the recommendation is being on it for a month before you go up. So sometimes people need 2 or 3 months on it, on the lower dose, and then they can go up. It depends on what your goals are in talking with your doctor. I also have used it, so I've also increased it in 2 weeks, so even faster. Most of the titration is related to what the symptom tolerance. So I don't typically do it faster than every 2 weeks, but yeah, I've gotten people up on the highest dose much faster than the clinical trials, because you have to understand the clinical trials are, they set those titration regimens because of side effects and the concern for side effects. What are some foods you would recommend for PCOS? I've talked a little bit about this in the past. I think PCOS diets, in my opinion, should probably be approached very similar to type 2 diabetes diets, because we know that many individuals with PCOS will also have insulin resistance. So there's some shared pathology there between type 2 diabetes and PCOS. So I would say, higher protein, 30% of your calories from protein, I think is a really strong starting point. I think probably lowering your total carb intake, maybe cutting it by 50% of what you normally get, I think would also be a reasonable thing to do, and focusing on the more lower glycemic foods. So cutting out like flour, grains, rice, pasta, all the foods we love. Doing that would be, or even just cutting back to an extent. So if you're someone that's like eating flour-based carbs several times a day, maybe doing it once a day or only a few times a week instead, even small changes like that. And that's the point most people don't understand, is it doesn't take much to have meaningful change. Just had a patient in this last time, the only thing we changed, came in, and I very quickly realized he wasn't someone that was going to be able to go from 0 to 60. Only thing we changed, we got him to stop drinking soda. That was it. He still eats fast food, still does a lot of things that otherwise probably are not great for his health that we know of, but just by cutting out soda, he's lost 20 pounds. That's it. And if you think about it, guys, everything you're doing to this point is sustaining the current state of things. Even small changes that have to be sustained, though, small changes that can be sustained can lead to meaningful change. So you don't have to go, a lot of people think about, oh my gosh, lifestyle changes, it's like I need to lose all this weight, it's so overwhelming, so daunting. If you can start making small iterative changes that allow you to make sustainable lifestyle changes, right? Because we're talking about lifestyle, not really dieting. I hate dieting. Everyone associates dieting with short-term changes. We want to create a new lifestyle. Small changes that you can sustain over the long term. You can dramatically change your health, and you can improve your weight just with small things. So think about that the next time you're trying to approach the issue, is what small things can you start building upon? And those small changes, I can tell you, add up over time. The problem with everyone is they're in a rush. They have to be 60 pounds down in a month, right? That's human nature. We need that instant gratification. But if you're able to keep sort of the long term in mind and get back to what I was talking about today, focus on the process, the rest of itself will take care. It will take care of itself. You don't have to worry about that. So focus on the process, focus on the small things, and they add up. You don't have to go crazy and cut all carbs out and do all these things. You need to build from a foundation that's sustainable. So PCOS, protein, lowerish carbs, plenty of healthy plants. That's how I would look at it. You're almost never going to go wrong with plants, guys. I mean, you look at any data set that we've had over the last 100 years of studying nutrition, fruits, vegetables, they've been associated with a decrease in pretty much every type of disease, decrease in incidence, lower risk of diabetes, lower risk of heart disease, lower risk of cancer. You can't really go wrong with fruits or vegetables. If anyone tells you that fruits or vegetables are problematic for you, they really probably have an agenda, I would say, and have a book to sell you. But the one thing you have to be careful of is if you're someone who has really uncontrolled or bad diabetes, that some high sugar fruits might not be, might not be ideal. And I would focus probably more on the vegetables in that case, because sugar, there can be some fruits that have a high sugar content. But for the vast majority of people, eating more fruits and vegetables can only benefit their health. How to get rid of hormonal chemo weight gain. Are you seeing new patients via telehealth? Yes, hormonal chemo weight gain. I would, that's interesting. I don't know as much, to be honest, about chemo-related weight gain. That's something I would have to look into. I don't know if there's a whole lot of literature on it, to be honest. If it has an effect on your hormonal balance, if it changes the way some of your appetite system works, I would have to look into that. I would probably approach it very similar to the way I approach other people, which is just a very personalized approach, finding out how we can help support you in your goals. But once again, this is a process. It's not like flipping a switch. Lomera for weight loss. What are your thoughts? So Lomera, great question. Lomera is a branded version of phentermine. I've talked a decent bit about phentermine in the past. Phentermine's been around since like the 50s, 1950s. Very safe drug for the vast majority of people, especially in the hands of an experienced clinician. Most widely prescribed weight loss medication of all time. Was one half of the fen-phen drug of the late 90s, early 2000s, before fen-phen got recalled. Turns out that it wasn't phentermine that was the problem, which is the active ingredient in Lomera. It was the fenfluramine. Fenfluramine was causing heart and lung problems that were killing people, actually. So that was not good. So FDA recalled it. But phentermine, probably the most widely prescribed drug that I use, just because it's got an incredible safety history. 60 plus years of safety data, really hard to beat that just in general in medicine. We have very few drugs that have 70 years of safety data. So really, unless you have glaucoma, you're coming off something called MAOIs, which no one uses those for depression anymore, but we used to, unless you've got active heart disease. I think there is a kidney, I think you can't have advanced kidney disease really. Otherwise like most people can do it, can trial at even low doses. So how do I feel about Lomera in particular? Because I think that was your question that I went off on a tangent. Lomera's fine. It's a low dose comparatively. So it's 8 milligrams 3 times a day is how Lomera is given. They created that way because some people have, even at the lowest of the typical sort of tablet and capsules, get overly stimulated with phentermine or feel like they are overly stimulated, maybe have a little sleep trouble. So they created Lomera as like an alternative has to be given more frequently because it has a really short half-life, but has less stimulation. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. The problem with Lomera is they don't have you can't really go up on the dose. They have one dose and that's it. Traditional phentermine, you can start at 15 milligrams, go up to 30, go up to 37.5. A lot of doctors prescribe higher than that. I don't typically, because if you're not responding at that point, you're not going to respond really to higher dose. So I would say, if it works for you, it works. Some people just need a little appetite modulation with some medicine that helps. And that's all the support they need. It's like having a spotter when you're doing a bench press or doing any type of exercise. Just they're there to help support you. Some people just need a little bit of support and they do really, really well. So Lomera, if it's an option for you and it's affordable for you, which is always a question about weight loss drugs, is there any prescription coverage, or is it affordable in terms of retail costs? Usually phentermine's pretty affordable. Then it's a good option for sure. Great question. It's not the science. The science has caught up. The science has been available. It's the scientific community that hasn't had an awareness of the science of obesity, and that it is, one, a disease, and it's been declared a disease for quite some time now, and two, that it's not driven by a lack of willpower or discipline, which often doctors make it out to be, right? When they're like, well, why aren't you just eating less? It doesn't make sense. Why aren't you putting the fork down and running more? So yeah, you're right. We do need to. And some of that is incorporating it into the medical education. When I was in medical school, and I'm a pretty young doctor, I graduated, 5-6 years ago from medical school. I was never taught what was available in the scientific literature about obesity, the causes of it, how to help people. It's not taught to doctors. So if you're going to your doctor and they're not a obesity specialist, like having done extra training like I did to get board certified, they probably have no idea what they're talking about as it relates to weight management. And they're probably going to tell you some things that may be unreliable or may be judgmental. And I would just say, if you're asking them for their advice, probably take it with a grain of salt, that you probably could find just as good advice on the internet as you could get from them. And the other thing is to give you perspective that doctors just don't know. And so what they don't know, they're going to be operating from less than ideal information, right? So it allows you to have a perspective when they are saying things that are incredibly ignorant to you, that can actually even be hurtful, that you have to understand that many of those doctors don't know better. I was taught people just need to work harder when they can't manage their weight, which isn't the case. Being on this side of it now, working with patients, I can tell you every single one of my patients is aware that they have weight issues. They've been trying their whole lives oftentimes, and the fact that it is a progressive condition that can also be relapsing, where the weight goes up and down frequently, but continues to go up, is very real. It's a very real situation that everyone deals with who comes to see me. So, it's sad that more medical professionals are not aware of this. And part of my job and part of what was charged to me when I was hired to help build the weight loss program at Cedars was to go out and give talks to educate the community in Los Angeles. So that's what I do a lot. I go out and I'm constantly invited. And you should see doctors' faces, these primary care doctors, when I'm talking to them about, the science of obesity. It's just like they had no idea. It's like a light, like their brains explode and melt. Like when I talk to them about, what's involved in it and the neurobiology and all of these factors in the appetite system and, a food addiction and all these different components that play a role. And it's like they had no idea. It's so funny. But they also are very humbled and then are encouraged to view it differently and to send patients to the right people that know how to treat it. So there's hope. We just need to get the message out. And that's a lot of the reason why I got on social media, is I wanted to not only engage with people and share the knowledge that I have, but also engage with other professionals, dietitians, physicians, scientists, all these people, and say, listen, it's a disease. It is real. It is not your patient's fault. It's not your fault if you're someone who struggled with it. The example I give all the time, President Taft, one of the most accomplished Americans in all of history, Supreme Court Justice before he became president, one of the most competent, smart, eloquent individuals of all time. He is very well known and documented as having very severe obesity, and he could never control his appetite. I wouldn't be surprised, given the modern technology, if he had the testing available to him that our presidents have now. If he very well may have had a genetic cause of his obesity. The way that they describe him in the diaries that they write about him. This is not someone who just couldn't put it together. This is not someone who was unintelligent, who was just a horrible person, right? Like that's often described when people can't lose weight effectively or that struggle in losing weight. This is someone who operated at the highest levels in society, who was incredibly accomplished professionally. Once again, the point is, it has nothing to do with you. It has very much to do with your biology, with the environment, things that you can't control. But of the things we can control, that's where we try to optimize as much as we can. And when we can, and when we need to, we seek treatment in the forms of effective treatments, not these gimmicky diet programs, this, half this, any fit influencers that put out there, this stuff. Yeah, you look like an Adonis because you have good genetics, right? And you get to work out all day because that's what you do for a living. That the advice you give is going to be very biased, and it's not going to be effective for 99.9% of people, right? Because they have very different circumstances. I've talked about that a lot. So, the culture around weight is changing, but as with anything in sort of culture in the United States, it's very slow to change. So, as the arc of truth or whatever that saying goes, it bends, but it always bends towards justice, and it always bends towards slowly, but it bends. All right. So we just got to keep pushing it. But yeah, great point. We all got to do our part. So I'm trying to do mine. Oh, thank you. I look so young. I am flattered. I'm 31. So I am pretty young by standards, but I will take the compliment. As I'm getting older, that's like a compliment now. Before, in my early 20s, I would have been like, no. But now I appreciate that, Treated with Megace here. I had significant weight gain with that. Interesting. Okay, yeah. We use Megace for appetite promotion for people who, in many cases, need support because they have cancer and they have cancer cachexia is what we call it. So we can give them appetite promoting drugs. But it sounds like you were put on it for probably hormonal reasons because it's also an estrogen related drug. Interesting. You had weight gain with that. And so now you're having to deal with that. Yeah. We use it all the time. So before I became an obesity physician and specializing in weight management, I was an internal medicine doctor, a faculty internal medicine doctor, and I taught residents and dealt with hospitalized cancer patients all the time, and a lot of times in very progressive states of their cancer, they get conditions where their body's just sort of wasting away, and we call that very catabolic state. And so we're trying to do anything we can to get food in them, like giving them ice cream, giving them whatever they'll take just to get calories in them, because they're becoming so weak and frail. We want them to be stronger to be able to tolerate treatment or, to have a chance at sort of getting to the next stage. So we'll give them sometimes appetite promoting medications like Megace. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of a mixed bag. Do you have advice for someone with Crohn's disease who wants to lose weight? Also Hashimoto's. I have several Crohn's patients that I work with. Hashimoto's and PCOS. You have the autoimmune spectrum right there. Although PCOS is not really thought to be autoimmune. We don't really know. We don't know enough about PCOS, to be honest. But hopefully you're not on steroids because that can make it difficult. But some people who have autoimmune diseases have to be on a low dose of steroid for a lot of their life. And that can or if they've had flares, Crohn's flares, we saw sometimes use steroid in the hospital, but more and more we're trying to use biologic treatments. Those cause less weight gain. But Crohn's is tough because sometimes Crohn's patients need special diets. But I would say, given sort of the inflammatory considerations, and the way that Crohn's patients can sort of respond uniquely, I would look at, and I'm sure you've maybe been talked to or maybe not, a specialist, a dietitian specialist for IBD, but I know the ones that I've worked with before, they often talk about food journaling, figuring out what you can and can't tolerate. But then, if you're able to, the same principles apply. Um, Sometimes you can tolerate more like an anti-inflammatory diet, which can be helpful. That's like more like plant-based, depending upon your tolerance. If you can't, more protein-rich diets. But once again, you kind of have to figure out what triggers you in the Crohn's and what doesn't. Some people who have inflammatory bowel disease can't eat a higher protein diet, like elimination type diet, and despite protein or animal meats being associated with increased inflammation, systemic inflammation, they seem to tolerate better. So, and that's probably because they're eliminating something that otherwise was triggering them, like grains or gluten, something like that. Funny sort of side note. So, at Cedars, we have like the world leader in researching the gut microbiome. So basically, all of the bacteria in the gut. They have like the leading lab in the entire world. And so they just gave a big lecture to us. And for the longest time, we were told gluten was kind of this thing that was more hype and more of like a marketing tool. And that gluten, unless you had a gluten allergy, there's no reason to avoid gluten, which is a wheat protein. And their lab has now shown data that gluten actually is probably more pro-inflammatory than anything else. So believe it or not, I think some of the speculation, which was based on no science, but some of the speculation around people being better, and I think was probably based on more just anecdote, which is we don't usually base, recommendations on anecdote because it's unreliable, probably has some truth to it. So gluten may actually be a little more inflammatory than what we originally thought, which I thought was interesting. I had not thought about that at all, and there's some of their data is confirming that it's more inflammatory than people who cut gluten out in certain individuals. So I thought that was really interesting. Why is my doctor trying to prescribe me metformin? I'm not diabetic yet. Kimberly Nicole, great question. There's a lot of data to support this. So back in the early 2000s, 2003, one of the most expensive diabetes prevention studies of all time, called the Diabetes Prevention Program, was done, where they compared 3 different treatments. One was metformin, one was exercise and lifestyle changes, and one was just kind of counseling. It was kind of like the placebo group. And they followed them for 3 or 4 years, eventually followed them 10 years. And they wanted to look at these individuals who are at risk of developing diabetes because they had pre-diabetes. Would they go on to develop diabetes, or would these interventions prevent the progression to diabetes? And what they found was both metformin and the lifestyle group, which they were counseled extensively on healthy lifestyle habits, exercise, dietary changes to weight loss and to control blood sugar. Both those groups had a reduction in their risk of developing diabetes. In the lifestyle group, it actually was more significant. It was like 50% reduction. In the metformin group, it was like 30%. And then when they looked at 10 years, there was a legacy effect from those initial interventions. The metformin group still had a reduction in risk of developing diabetes, like ended up being like 20%, and the lifestyle group was similar. So at 10 years, the lifestyle and the metformin groups were similar in terms of their ability to reduce the risk of someone with prediabetes going on and developing diabetes. So to this day, that is like the seminal study by which doctors prescribe metformin, and why we use metformin in people that don't have diabetes. It's because it's been shown to prevent the progression, or at least slow the progression to diabetes. More and more evidence suggests that lifestyle is far and away the most important thing for that. But at least at the time, metformin was found to be effective. And so that's why people prescribe it outside of having diabetes. Great question. It's actually one of like the most important studies that has been done the last 20 years. For someone with pseudotumor, which is idiopathic intracranial hypertension, which is what IIH stands for, to lose weight, I constantly feel fatigued. Yes, Breezy. I would tell you, if you're not followed by someone who's monitoring you for your weight and helping you lose weight, then you should be. And if you are not being followed by a neurologist, or someone who can monitor the status of your pseudotumor cerebri, which is the sort of other name of it, then you should. I have a few patients who I see for that, and surprisingly, GLP-1 agonists, there's some new data that suggests they may be uniquely helpful. So Sex and Trulicity, Bydureon, all of those, Victoza, those medications may be uniquely helpful in helping people manage it because it also helps treat the underlying production of fluid that's causing the increase in pressure in the brain. And those also promote weight loss, so it has a dual benefit. And there's some early evidence to suggest that those drugs may be uniquely helpful. So something to think about if you're interested in a medication for weight loss. But also just losing 5 to 10% of your body weight has been shown to dramatically improve symptom management for that disease and curtail the burden of the disease as a whole. Very similar to PCOS that way, very weight responsive. I don't mind that you were moved by my personal weight loss story. That's why I posted it. I wanted to share my own personal struggles, something that I completely own and I am not ashamed by. We each have our own journey and our own story, and totally comfortable in my skin. I wasn't always. I was very uncomfortable, but it was deeper. It was deeper than my weight issues. My weight issues were a reflection of my emotional, psychological, all of the above struggles that I was going through at the time, in my life, and it just happened to manifest as a weight problem. And that's where the etiology, or just the origin of everyone's own struggles, is very unique. And if you're working with someone who is good at what they do and helping people manage their weight, they acknowledge these things. They don't just tell people to eat less, right? Because if part of the reason why, or the main reason why you struggle with your weight is because you're eating because you're sad, you're eating because you've suffered personal trauma and it has been a coping mechanism. You're eating for any number of unique reasons that the person working with you acknowledges those and tries to help you, because once again, you're just going to be treating a symptom of the problem if you don't get to the bottom of it. And so some of that is being able to have those conversations with yourself and being open to sharing them with others so that they can help you. But I also acknowledge the fact that you may not be comfortable sharing those with every provider or with every person. I also respect that, and that's where, there has to be a give and take. We have to understand, when you are comfortable sharing them with your provider, that the provider is a willing listener, and that they're not going to be judgmental, which I can't promise for every provider that they're going to do that, unfortunately. But I think it's important. It's important we acknowledge all these different considerations. Do you recommend low carb generally for weight management? I recommend low carb for weight management if eating low carb helps you lose weight, and do it for a long period of time, not for a month or 2 months, which most people do when they try low carb. It has to be sustainable. So if it's going to be hard for you to maintain low carb, maybe you can, but you like sort of how you feel, you like how the energy you have, maybe try eating a more modest low carb. Most people that don't understand, they don't have to go from what they're currently eating to like 0 carbs. You can cut 50% of them or a third of them and sort of reduce the sources of carbs where you're coming from, or choose lower sugar carbs, lower glycemic carbs. There are a lot of ways you can do it. And I will tell you, most of my patients who start off doing keto, who come to me and we work on their diet, they almost never stay in ketosis. They go from eating less than 20 or 30 grams of carbs to somewhere around 50 to 100. That's where they kind of find their sweet spot that's maintainable, because they also want to have some fruit. They also want to have some vegetables and some of these other things. And so it allows them to make it sustainable. Once again, if it's not sustainable, if it can't be made into a lifestyle, then it is not worth a damn. Really appreciate you guys. Have been awesome tonight. Really great positive attitudes, supportive of each other, which, I'm all about, creating a great network of support, listening to each other, being inquisitive, keeping an open mind about all this stuff, trying to share reliable information, not gaslighting each other, and fear-mongering, and which sometimes I have to deal with. But once again, I really appreciate everyone joining. Really great discussion tonight. The last thing I would say is this experience, the journey that I am assuming you are all on, otherwise you wouldn't be here, is incredibly personal. Whatever someone tells you to do, I think you have to understand how that fits into your own personal journey. Whatever people recommend, you have to determine whether or not that makes sense for yourself. Oftentimes, smaller changes can lead to more meaningful results in the long term than making radical changes to your lifestyle, because smaller things are more readily integrated into your life. So I would just keep that all in mind as you're looking through. There's a lot about get the new best diet, the new lifestyle, the new fasting protocol, all these things that you see on the internet. And when we actually rigorously study them, at the end of the day, they're no better than all the traditional stuff we've been doing all along. It really comes down to how well it works for the individual, how sustainable it is. Are they happy in doing it? Are they miserable when doing it? Are they inconsistent because it's not sustainable, or because they're miserable? Find what works for you. Find what allows you to continue to have good quality of life, but also addresses the many factors that are relating to your causes of weight gain. If you have strong biological causes of weight gain, I encourage you to seek out experts that can work with you on different physiologic treatments like medications and surgery if they're appropriate. And once again, this is a much more exciting time to be seeking help, because the treatments that we have in the pipeline, our understanding as a whole on how to manage the disease of obesity or just anyone's weight or weight-related issues is improving at a rapid pace. And so I'm really excited where this field is headed as a whole, and many more doctors are becoming certified in this and are learning about it. So really good time to be involved, and I would just encourage you all, if you feel like you could benefit from help, to find a provider that's willing to work with you, and that's good, and that's open to what you have to offer and your story, and that is willing to listen, and then willing to work with you on developing a plan that works best for you. That's all I have tonight. Really appreciate it, you guys. You guys take care of yourself. If you celebrate Easter, happy Easter, and I will see you next time.